Hey, good morning, friends. Mark Holmes here with my buddy Cowboy Joe Boo, as well as Joe Bayer in the house. And as always, I want to thank you guys for watching, commenting, subscribing, and being part of the Joe Boo Sports Report. Without you guys, this literally does not work. I mean, seriously, it does not work. So let's get open. Oh, we're already open for business. And let's wake up the football gods. Wake up this morning. Wake up. You guys awake? And happy Independence Day. It was 244 years ago today that the United States, or became the United States, when they declared their independence from England. Happy 4th. So we sit here 71 days, 9 hours, 24 minutes away from kickoff of hopefully the 2019 season. And the NFL and the NFLPA is still trying to figure out how we're going to have the season. You can see that things are being made up on the fly. We've never had to deal with a global pandemic before, especially with it biting the United States the way that it has. And at least there's basketball and baseball that are beginning to start out before football is, and maybe they'll be able to learn some things from those two sports to figure out how we go ahead and deal with this situation. We already know that the Hall of Fame game for the Cowboys and Steelers is canceled. We also know that week 1 and week 4 of the preseason have already been canceled, reducing it basically to 2 preseason games, which isn't the worst thing in the world. What we really want to do is we want to get to real games. Now, the NFLPA is still looking, of course, for their players, which they should. It's the reason why they have a players association. Here's their proposal for the preseason. They don't want to play any preseason games. You know, in most years, you hate preseason games because you end up losing guys in a preseason game that's meaningless for the season. It's gotten to the point where a lot of teams, I mean, Aaron Rodgers, Carson Wentz, those guys didn't play anything in preseason. And most starters play very little. So it's not exactly the end of the world. It's really those rookies and those younger guys and guys that are trying to make a team that really play in those preseason games more than anything else. But here's what the NFLPA is actually suggesting to the NFL, and we'll see if this flies. And I'm sure that some way they'll work out something, but I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't have any preseason games. So the NFLPA is basically saying the first 3 days of training camp, which starts out August 28th. Understand, with the new collective bargaining agreement, the training camp was already reduced. The amount of padded practices were already reduced. So they're suggesting the first 3 days, medical and equipment. So the players will get the physicals on, get their coronavirus test, and get fitted for all their equipment and everything else. Then 21 days of strength and conditioning. Because, let's face it, there's been no OTAs. There's been no coming to facilities or working out. It's a matter of getting these guys in shape. Sure, we see guys out running routes and things like that, but that's not still the same as getting together with a strength coach, checking out the injuries and getting you in full battle-ready conditions. And dare I say, they really, really need it. And this is where it's a disadvantage for a lot of coaches that are new to teams, or a lot of changes where you've changed over the roster, because now you've got a lot to learn without the time and the OTAs and the work to be able to do it. So 21 days of strength and conditioning, then 10 days of unpadded practices. 10 days. After that, it's followed by 14 days of practice with a maximum of 10 practices and no more than 8 of them padded. And then you go into week 1. So we're talking about 8 padded practices at most, full go practices. And then you're going into regular season. So what you can really expect, I want you to think about this now. Basically, the first month of the season is preseason. It's going to be sloppy out there. You're going to see a lot of missed tackles. You're going to see a lot of people in the wrong positions and things like that. You'll probably be seeing a lot more simplified game planning Because if you got a new quarterback in town, you got a new coach, you got new players, you haven't had the time to go through and learn all the terminology, get all the routes and stuff together. This year may be one of the craziest years that we've ever seen in football. It's just unfortunately the way that it is. But I think at this point, we'd be happy for flag football. Now, to me, and I understand this completely, because you don't want to play preseason games if you are risking losing players for weeks on end from the coronavirus. It's not a matter of, if they're even on the field. You could have a guy staying on the sidelines and he's next to somebody else who's got it. Now he's lost without having a physical injury. I get that. But having 8 padded practices, back in the day, we used to have 2-a-day padded practices. We'd have more than 8 padded practices in a week. And we'd have a special team practice full go in between. This is going to be like training for the Indianapolis 500, driving 55 miles an hour in practice, and then on Sunday driving 200 plus. It's 0 to 60 between the games. It will be interesting, and I think you'll see a lot of soft tissue injuries. I think you'll see a lot of pulled muscles. And I think it's going to end up being, more than anything else, it is going to be survival of the fittest of who actually keeps more players on the field. The practice squad players may end up being part of the season, playing during the season. It's going to be that crazy of a season, depending on how much of it we actually have. I hope and pray that we're able to get a season in, but it's going to be difficult. It truly is. When you think of the NFL as looking at doing things like, instead of teams staying at, away hotels, it will be you fly in, you play the game, you come back home. Now, other things that may end up helping the NFL, I was reading that basically about 80% of the money that comes in to the NFL, of that $15 billion, comes in through basically television. About 20% of the gross revenues come in actually from the gates. So it's still a sizable portion of money that actually comes from the gates. But because they're looking at being able to take the first 6 and 8 seats of the stadium, that they're going to be able to sell more advertising, which will end up bringing in more revenue that way. And they're also looking at it from the standpoint of, instead of saying, okay, this year we lost so much money, we're just going to slam, the salary cap the following year. They don't want to do that, because if you do that, people will say, oh, the Cowboys can't sign Dak Prescott, because if they do, then they won't be able to do anything in free agency, or they're going to be screwed in the cap. Well, technically, you'd be better off signing him to a long-term deal and making next year's deal team-friendly. But we're in better position than some of the other teams. For example, currently, money that is tied up for next year, I believe, is $182 million for the Cowboys. For, say, the Eagles, it's about $260. So even if you sign Dak with that franchise tag next year again, you're still in better shape than some of the other teams. And the NFL does not want to have to go through and have Armageddon where everybody's got to butcher the rosters. So they're looking at basically absorbing whatever cap hit and spreading it out over several years. So that way it won't be quite as traumatic, figuring that this isn't, where people just aren't watching football anymore, that this is a temporary situation. And that'll definitely help as far as, keeping everything on an even keel, because for all we know, we may end up getting through and having a week or two and realize that it's just not feasible. And that's a reality that we have to at least be prepared for. And one thing I always say is hope for the best, expect the worst, and you are never disappointed. And if it doesn't work the first time, come up with another plan of a way and a plan of action. One other final note here too is the NCAA. Here's where, they're kind of working together with the NFL for a kind of. They're looking at the possibility of having their season in the spring. And they've already talked to the NFL about the possibility of, how would you feel about having the draft at a different time than in the spring? NFL says, no, we don't like that idea. But one other note, sidebar here. The NFL has a lot of flexibility that they've built into the schedule. And part of that flexibility is the possibility of playing games when there's no NCAA games going on. So if by chance they decide we're going to play games in the spring, the NCAA, you will see football games on Saturdays, which means Thursday games, Saturday games, Sunday games, Monday games. They will take up the space. And if there's anybody that will be able to pull it off, I would say a business that rakes in over $15 billion a year will find a way to get it done. So we'll see how that goes. I hope everybody has a great 4th of July. And I've got some work I need to do. Thank you guys, as always, for watching, and I'll see you soon.